Ruth McAllister pressed her hand over her youngest daughter's mouth to stop the crying. The wagon creaked. Snow fell thick as wool. Behind her, 6 more children huddled silent the way Franklin had taught them to be silent. She'd stolen them in the night, stolen her own babies from their father's house like a thief, and if he found her now, he'd kill her for it. The notice had said, "Cook wanted." It hadn't promised salvation, but salvation was exactly what Ruth needed. If you want to see whether this desperate mother finds refuge or ruin, subscribe to our channel and stay until the very end. Drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. We love seeing how far Ruth's story travels. The wagon wheel hit a frozen rut. Ruth grabbed the seat rail. Behind her, baby Clara whimpered, and Sarah clamped her hand over the infant's mouth, fast instinct sharp as a blade. "Hush now," Sarah whispered. "Hush." Ruth didn't turn around. She kept her eyes forward, counting the shapes through the snow. A roof. A chimney. Smoke rising gray against white sky. "Mama!" Thomas pulled himself up beside her, 12 years old, but his eyes belonged to a man who'd seen too much. "That the place?" "That's it. You sure he'll take us?" Ruth's hands tightened on the reins. "No." Thomas nodded. He didn't ask more. He'd stopped asking questions 3 states ago, somewhere between the night they'd fled and the morning they'd run out of bread. The mule trudged forward. Ruth felt every child's breath behind her. 7 lives, 7 mouths, 7 reasons Franklin would hunt her to the edge of the earth. She'd counted the money 14 times since Nebraska. 43 cents. 43 cents and a notice torn from a post outside Miller's Creek. Wanted cook for winter. Room board, honest wages. Caleb Thornton Ridgeback Ranch. Honest. She'd stared at that word until her eyes burned. Honest meant maybe. Maybe this stranger wouldn't drink. Maybe he wouldn't hit. Maybe he wouldn't look at her children like they were burdens to be beaten into shape. Maybe. Ruth had stopped believing in maybe. But she hadn't stopped needing it. "William?" she called back without turning. "You got your sister." Silence. "William?" Yes, Mama." The stutter came thick. It always did when he was scared. 8 years old, and Franklin's fists had stolen half his words. "Good boy. Hold tight to Eliza. Don't let go." The ranch house grew larger. Ruth counted windows, counted steps to the porch, counted the seconds until a stranger would decide if her children lived or died this winter. The door opened. A man stepped out. Tall, broad hands loose at his sides. He wore no coat despite the cold. His face looked carved from the same wood as the porch, hard-weathered, giving nothing away. Ruth pulled the wagon to a stop. She climbed down before he could speak, boots sinking into snow up to her ankles. The cold bit through her stockings. She ignored it. "Mr. Thornton." He nodded once. "I'm Ruth McAllister. I came about the notice. The cook position." His eyes moved past her. She watched him count. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 7. His jaw tightened. "Notice said cook," he said. "Didn't say nothing about a whole orphanage. They ain't orphans. They're mine. All 7. All 7. And their daddy." Ruth's stomach clenched. She'd practiced this answer in the dark, whispered it to the night until the words stopped shaking. Dead. 6 months gone. Caleb studied her. Ruth held his gaze. "Don't look away." Looking away meant weakness. Weakness meant pain. Franklin had taught her that much. "You came through this weather," Caleb said, "with 7 young ones, in a wagon that's half rotted and a mule that's mostly starved." "I did." "Why?" "Because your notice was the only one that said honest." Something shifted in his face. Ruth couldn't name it. Behind her, Clara started crying again. Not the soft whimper from before, a real cry, the kind that meant hunger had turned to pain. Sarah tried to quiet her, but the sound cut through the snow like a knife. "That baby sick?" Caleb asked. "Hungry." When she last eat proper? Ruth's throat closed. 4 days. Caleb's expression didn't change. But something in his stance did. He stepped back from the doorway. Bring them inside. Ruth blinked. Sir. You deaf. I said bring them inside. All of them. The barn would be fine. We're used to barns for animals. His voice came hard. Your children ain't animals. Bring them in. He disappeared into the house. Ruth stood frozen snow collecting on her shoulders. Mama. Thomas appeared beside her. What do we do? Ruth turned. 7 faces watched her from the wagon. 7 pairs of eyes waiting for her to decide their fate. We go inside, she said. Quickly, no noise. Mind your manners. They moved fast. Thomas lifted Clara from Sarah's arms. Mary grabbed Eliza's hand. James pulled Daniel down from the wagon bed. William came last, his small hand gripping the wooden rail, his stutter trapped behind pressed lips. Ruth counted them as they passed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All present, all breathing, all hers. Inside, heat hit her like a wall. The children pressed close, drawn to the warmth of the stove in the corner. Ruth scanned the room. 1 table, 2 chairs. A cot pushed against the wall. A door leading somewhere else. A ladder climbing to a loft. Small, sparse, clean. No bottles on the shelf. No smell of whiskey soaked into the wood. No holes punched in the walls. Ruth let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Caleb stood by the stove, feeding it wood. Table's there. Sit the little ones down. Thomas hesitated. Sir, we don't mean to trouble. Ain't trouble. Caleb didn't look up. Sit. The children sat. Ruth watched them arrange themselves the way they'd learned oldest, on the outside, youngest protected in the middle. Battle formation. Franklin had made that necessary too. Caleb straightened. He crossed to a shelf and pulled down a tin. Coffee's here. Bread in the box. Ain't much else ready, but there's flour, salt, pork, dried beans in the cellar. I can cook, Ruth said. Just show me where. First you sit. He pointed to the remaining chair. You're shaking so hard you'll drop the first pot you touch. Ruth looked down at her hands. He was right. They trembled like leaves in a storm. She sat. Caleb moved around the small space. He poured something into a cup, brought it to her. Coffee, hot and bitter. Ruth wrapped her fingers around it, let the heat seep into her bones. Thank you, she whispered. He didn't answer. He'd already turned to Sarah, who still held Clara against her chest. Baby needs milk, he said. I got some stored in the cold cellar. Cows mostly dry this time of year, but there's enough. Sarah looked at Ruth. Ruth nodded. Sarah passed Clara to Caleb's waiting arms. Ruth tensed. Every muscle in her body screamed to grab her daughter back. A man holding her child. A stranger. Franklin's face flashed through her mind the way he'd held Daniel once held him over the well, and laughed while Ruth screamed. But Caleb just cradled Clara against his chest, easy and careful like he'd done it before. Sarah, he said. That your name? Yes, sir. There's a jar in the cellar, 2nd shelf blue lid. Fetch it. Sarah scrambled to obey. Ruth watched Caleb hold her baby. Watched his big hands support Clara's head. Watched him bounce her gentle when she fussed. You've done this before, Ruth said. Caleb's jaw tightened. Once. He didn't explain. Ruth didn't ask. Sarah returned with the milk. Caleb showed her how to warm it by the stove, how to test it on her wrist before feeding. Ruth watched her daughter learn from this stranger, and something cracked open in her chest. Mr. Thornton. Caleb. Caleb. She tested the name. I can pay. It ain't much, but... You came to cook. You cook. That's payment. And the children. Eat what we eat. He finally met her eyes. You think I'd let you starve while your babies watch? Ruth opened her mouth. Closed it. She didn't have an answer. She'd known men who would do exactly that. She'd married one. "I don't understand," she said. "You don't know us. You don't owe us nothing. Why?" "Because I know what hungry looks like." Caleb handed Clara back to Sarah. "And I know what scared looks like. And I know what it looks like when someone's running from something worse than winter." The words hit Ruth's chest like a fist. She felt tears burn behind her eyes. She blinked them back. "I ain't asking what you're running from," Caleb continued. "That's your business. But whatever it is, it ain't getting through that door. Not while you're under my roof." He grabbed his coat from a hook by the door. "I got work in the barn. Animals still need tending, storm or no storm. You get settled. Get the little ones fed. We'll talk wages and such when I get back." He pulled open the door. Cold rushed in. Then he was gone, swallowed by the white. Ruth sat motionless. Her children stared at her, waiting for instructions, waiting for her to explain what had just happened. "Mama." Mary's voice was barely a whisper. Is he like Daddy?" Ruth looked at the door, at the stove, at the roof that didn't leak and the walls that held no fist-shaped holes. "No baby," she said. "I don't think he is." The afternoon passed in a blur of small tasks. Ruth found the kitchen supplies, organized them with quick hands. She set water to boil. She measured flour for biscuits. She moved, and moving kept the fear at bay. The children helped without being asked. Thomas stacked firewood by the stove. Sarah minded Clara. Mary swept the floor. James and Daniel folded the quilts Caleb had pulled from a chest. Eliza sat with William, holding his hand, keeping him calm. Ruth watched them work. Her army, her reason, her everything. "Mama," Thomas appeared at her elbow. "There's a man outside." Ruth's blood went cold. "What?" "Not Mr. Thornton. Someone else. On a horse. Just watching." Ruth crossed to the window. She wiped frost from the glass and peered out. A figure sat mounted at the edge of the property. Dark coat, hat pulled low, too far away to see a face, just watching. Ruth's hands shook. Franklin. It had to be Franklin. He'd found her already. The figure turned his horse and rode away, disappearing into the snow. Ruth stood frozen, her heart hammered against her ribs. "Mama." Thomas touched her arm. "Who was that?" "I don't know." Was it Daddy?" Ruth pulled her son close. "I don't know, baby. I don't know." The door opened. Ruth spun her hand, grabbing a knife from the counter without thought. Caleb stopped in the doorway. Snow covered his shoulders. His eyes went to the knife, then to Ruth's face. "Easy," he said. "Just me." Ruth lowered the knife. Her hand shook. "I'm sorry. I thought I saw him." Caleb closed the door. "The rider." "You know who it was?" "No." He pulled off his gloves. "But I aim to find out. Tomorrow I'll ride into town, ask around. And if it's—" Ruth stopped. She couldn't say it. Couldn't speak his name in this warm, safe place. Caleb stepped closer, not touching her, just close enough that she could see the steadiness in his eyes. "If it's someone looking for you," he said, "they'll have to come through me first." Ruth stared at him. This stranger, this man who'd known her for less than a day. Why would he protect her? Why would he risk anything for a woman with 7 children and 43 cents to her name? "Why?" she whispered. Caleb didn't answer right away. He crossed to the stove, warmed his hands, and stared at the flames. 5 years ago," he said, "I wore a star. Lawman in a little town in Kansas. I had a wife, a good woman, better than I deserved." He paused. "Bank robbery. I was out on patrol. She was inside." Another pause. "I buried her 3 days before Christmas." Ruth felt her chest tighten. "I couldn't protect her," Caleb continued. I was supposed to protect the whole town, and I couldn't protect the one person who mattered. He turned to face Ruth. I ain't been able to protect anyone since. Until now. I don't need... Yes, you do. His voice was quiet but firm. You got 7 children. You got no money, no kin, and something chasing you through the snow. You need protection, Mrs. McAllister. And I need... He stopped, started again. I need to remember what protecting someone feels like. Ruth's eyes burned. She blinked fast. It's Ruth, she said. Just Ruth. Ruth. He nodded. Get some rest. Tomorrow's another day. He walked to the bedroom door, stopped, and looked back. Whatever you're running from, he said. It ain't gonna win. Not this time. He disappeared into the bedroom. The door clicked shut. Ruth stood alone in the kitchen, knife still in her hand. Her children had gathered in the corner, watching her with wide eyes. It's all right, she told them. We're safe here. She didn't know if she believed it, but for the first time in 3 years, she wanted to. That night, after the children slept, Ruth sat by the dying fire. She pulled the notice from her pocket, unfolded it, and read the words one more time. Honest wages. Maybe, she thought. Maybe honest wasn't just about money. Maybe honest was about a man who looked at 7 hungry children and saw human beings instead of burdens. Maybe honest was about a stranger who offered protection instead of pain. Maybe honest was about a second chance. Outside, the wind howled. Snow piled against the windows. Somewhere in the dark, a rider had watched this house and ridden away. Ruth knew that rider would be back. Franklin McAllister never let go of what he believed was his. But tonight, her children were warm. Tonight they'd eaten. Tonight they slept without fear. And tomorrow, Ruth would fight for one more day. One more day was all she'd ever asked for. Morning came hard and gray. Ruth woke before the children, her body stiff from sleeping on the floor. She lay still for a moment, listening. No heavy footsteps, no bottles clinking, no cursing. Just the pop of wood in the stove and the soft breathing of her babies. She pushed herself up. Clara fussed in Sarah's arms, hungry again. Ruth crossed to the cold cellar, fetched the milk, warmed it by the stove the way Caleb had shown Sarah yesterday. The bedroom door opened. Caleb stepped out, already dressed, already alert. His eyes swept the room, once counting children, checking windows, reading the silence the way a man reads weather. Sleep any? He asked. Some. Liar. Ruth almost smiled. Almost. Caleb pulled on his coat. I'm riding into town. Need supplies. Need answers about that rider. I should come with you. No. Mr. Thornton. Caleb. Caleb. Ruth set down the milk. If someone's looking for me, I should know who. I should face it. You got 7 children who need their mama alive. He pulled his hat from the hook. You stay. I go. That's the end of it. Ruth wanted to argue. She'd spent 3 years swallowing arguments, choking on words Franklin wouldn't let her speak. But something in Caleb's voice wasn't command. It was concern. Fine, she said. But you tell me everything when you get back. Everything. Deal. He opened the door, then paused. There's a rifle above the mantel. You know how to shoot. My daddy taught me before I could walk. Good. He stepped into the cold. Use it if you need to. The door closed. Ruth stood alone with her children and a rifle she prayed she wouldn't need. Thomas appeared at her elbow. Mama, where's he going? Town, for supplies. And to ask about that man, the one watching us. Ruth touched her son's face. 12 years old. He shouldn't know about men who watched. He shouldn't know about danger and running and fear. But Franklin had stolen that innocence long ago. Yes, she said, to ask about that man. What if it's Daddy? Ruth's hand trembled. Then we'll figure it out. He'll hurt you again. Thomas, he'll hurt all of us. Thomas's voice cracked. He said he would. He said if you ever took us away, he'd find us and he'd stop. Ruth pulled her son close, pressed his face against her shoulder. Listen to me. Whatever your daddy said, whatever he promised, I won't let him touch you. Any of you. I'd die first. Thomas shook in her arms, not crying. He'd stopped crying after Franklin broke his arm for spilling milk. But shaking, yes. Shaking like a leaf in a storm. I hate him, Thomas whispered. I hate him so much. I know, baby. I know. The morning stretched long. Ruth kept the children busy. She set Mary and Sarah to sorting the pantry. She gave James and Daniel rags to polish the few pieces of furniture. She sat with William and helped him practice his letters patient and slow, waiting for each stuttered word. Eliza stayed close to the window watching the snow. Mama. She was 10, quiet like William, but for different reasons. Eliza watched everything, remembered everything. What if the man from yesterday comes back? Then we stay inside and stay quiet. What if he tries to get in? Ruth looked at the rifle above the mantel. He won't. But what if... Eliza. Ruth crossed to her daughter, knelt down, took her hands. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Eliza's eyes searched Ruth's face, looking for lies, looking for the false promises Franklin used to make before the hitting started. I trust you, Mama, she said finally, but I don't trust anyone else. Ruth kissed her forehead. That's my smart girl. Noon came and went. Ruth made biscuits with the flour Caleb had shown her. She fried salt pork until it crackled. She fed her children real food, hot food, and watched them eat like they'd forgotten what full felt like. Clara drank her milk and slept. William managed 3 whole sentences without stuttering. Daniel laughed at something James said, and the sound of it, that pure childish laughter, made Ruth's eyes burn. This is what peace feels like, she thought. This is what normal could be. Then hoofbeats sounded outside. Ruth froze. Thomas grabbed Daniel and pushed him toward the other children. Sarah clutched Clara tight. Mary pulled William and Eliza into the corner. Battle formation. Without a word. Without a thought. Ruth took the rifle from the mantel. Stay back, she said. All of you. Don't make a sound. She crossed to the window, peered through the frost. One rider. Tall, broad shoulders. Caleb. Ruth's knees nearly buckled. She lowered the rifle, opened the door. Caleb dismounted, his face hard. He carried 2 sacks over his shoulder, but his eyes held something that made Ruth's stomach clench. What happened? She asked. He stepped inside, dropped the sacks on the table. Close the door. Ruth obeyed. The children stayed in their corner, silent, watching. Caleb pulled off his gloves. His jaw worked like he was chewing on words he didn't want to speak. There's a man in town, he said finally. Arrived 2 days ago. Been asking questions. Ruth's blood turned to ice. What kind of questions? Looking for a woman. Brown hair. 7 children. Caleb met her eyes. Name of McAllister. The room tilted. Ruth grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. Did you see him? She whispered. No. He was out when I got there, but I talked to Ezra Stone. Owns the general store. He's the one been answering this stranger's questions. What did Stone tell him? Caleb's expression darkened. Everything. That you came through yesterday. That you're staying here. That you looked like you were running from something. Ruth closed her eyes. 3 years of running. 3 states. Hundreds of miles. And it all came down to a shopkeeper with a loose tongue. There's more, Caleb said. More. Stone told me something else. Something about the man asking questions. Caleb paused. He ain't your husband. Ruth's eyes snapped open. What? Stone said the man introduced himself as Marcus McAllister, your husband's brother. Marcus. Ruth's mind raced. Franklin's older brother, the respectable one, the one who wore suits and went to church and pretended he didn't know what happened behind Franklin's closed doors. "Marcus is worse than Franklin," Ruth whispered. "How so?" "Franklin hits. Marcus plans." Ruth's hands shook. "Franklin would chase me in a rage. Marcus will chase me with lawyers, with judges, with men who think a wife belongs to her husband no matter what he does to her." Caleb stepped closer. "Ruth, look at me." She looked. "I don't care if he brings an army," Caleb said. "He ain't taking you or your children from this ranch, not while I'm breathing." "You don't understand. Marcus has money, connections. He could try." Caleb's voice went cold. "Men like him think money buys everything. They're wrong." Ruth wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. But she'd believed before. She'd believed Franklin when he'd promised to love and cherish. She'd believed his mother when she'd said he'd change after the wedding. She'd believed her own foolish heart for 8 long years. Believing had nearly killed her. "Thomas," Caleb said. The boy stepped forward from the corner. "I need you to help me with something." Thomas straightened. "Yes, sir." "We're gonna reinforce the doors. Windows too. Can you handle a hammer?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Let's get to work." Ruth watched them go, her son and this stranger who'd become their protector in less than 2 days. Thomas walked taller beside Caleb. His shoulders were back. His chin was up. For the first time in 3 years, her boy looked like a boy instead of a victim. The afternoon passed in a blur of hammering and preparation. Ruth kept cooking, kept cleaning, kept moving. If she stopped moving, she'd think. If she thought, she'd panic. And panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. Sarah helped with Clara. Mary watched the younger ones. Eliza stayed at the window, standing guard like a tiny soldier. Evening fell early the way it did in winter. Caleb and Thomas came inside, faces flushed with cold hands raw from work. "Doors are solid now," Caleb said. "Windows too. Anyone tries to force their way in, we'll hear them coming." Ruth set food on the table. "And if they don't try to force, if they come legal with papers and badges..." Caleb sat down. "Then we meet them at the door with truth." Truth didn't help me before. I went to the sheriff in Nebraska, showed him the bruises, showed him what Franklin did to William's mouth. Ruth's voice cracked. "He said a man has a right to discipline his family." The table went quiet. The children stopped eating. William's hand crept to his lips, touching the scar that split his upper lip where Franklin's ring had caught him. Caleb looked at William, really looked at him. Then he stood cross to the boy and knelt down until they were eye level. "William," he said softly, "can you tell me what happened to your mouth?" William's eyes went wide. He looked at Ruth. She nodded. "Daddy," William whispered. "He hit me. Because I was talking too slow." "And now you stutter." William nodded. Caleb reached out slowly, giving the boy time to pull away. When William didn't move, Caleb put his hand on the boy's shoulder. "That ain't discipline," Caleb said. "That's evil. And evil don't get to win. Not here. Not ever. You understand me?" William's eyes filled with tears. He nodded again. Caleb squeezed his shoulder once, then stood. He looked around the table at each child. Thomas with his old eyes. Sarah with Clara in her arms. Mary and James and Daniel and Eliza. 7 children, 7 survivors. "I'm gonna make you all a promise," Caleb said. "Nobody's gonna hurt you in this house. Nobody's gonna raise a hand to you or your mama. And if anyone tries, they'll answer to me first." Daniel, the youngest boy, spoke up. "You promise." Caleb met his eyes. "I promise." "Daddy promised things too," Daniel said. "He promised he'd stop. He never stopped." Ruth felt her heart crack. 6 years old. Her baby knew what broken promises tasted like. Caleb knelt again this time in front of Daniel. Your daddy and me ain't the same. I don't make promises I can't keep, and I don't hurt children, ever." Daniel studied him. The scrutiny of a child is the purest kind. No pretense, no politeness, just raw truth-seeking. "Okay," Daniel said finally. "I believe you." Ruth let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. They finished supper in something close to peace. The children helped clean up, then settled onto their quilts by the stove. Ruth tucked each one in, kissed each forehead, whispered each name like a prayer. Thomas, Sarah, Mary, James, Eliza, William, Daniel, and Clara already asleep in her makeshift cradle. 8 hearts beating under one roof, 9 counting Caleb. When the children finally slept, Ruth found Caleb by the window staring out at the dark. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "What you said to them." "Yes, I did." "Why you barely know us." Caleb turned. In the dim light, his face looked younger somehow, vulnerable. "Because someone should have said it to them before," he said. "Someone should have told those children they matter, that they're worth protecting." He paused. If they didn't hear it from their daddy, they needed to hear it from somewhere. Ruth felt tears slide down her cheeks. She wiped them away roughly. "I tried to protect them," she whispered. "I put myself between Franklin and them every time I could. I took the hits so they wouldn't have to. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough. You got them out. After 8 years. After William's mouth. After Thomas's arm. After—" her voice broke. "After too much." Caleb stepped closer. "Ruth, look at me." She looked. "You got them out," he repeated. "That's what matters. You didn't give up. You didn't stop. You fought for those children every single day, and when the fighting wasn't enough, you ran. That ain't weakness. That's the strongest thing a mother can do." Ruth broke. The tears she'd held back for months, years, came flooding out. She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. Caleb didn't touch her, didn't try to hold her. He just stood there, solid as stone, letting her fall apart in safety. When the sobs finally slowed, Ruth looked up. "I'm sorry. I don't usually—" "Don't apologize." His voice was firm. "You earned those tears. Every one of them." Ruth wiped her face. "What happens now?" "Now we sleep. Tomorrow we plan. And when Marcus McAllister shows up, because he will show up, we'll be ready." "How can you be so sure?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "Because I spent 5 years doing nothing. Hiding from the world. Letting guilt eat me alive." He met her eyes. "I'm done hiding. And I'm done letting bad men win." Ruth studied him. This broken man. This lonely rancher. This stranger who'd opened his door to a desperate woman and her 7 children. "Why did you really take us in?" she asked. "The truth." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "Because when I saw you climb down from that wagon, I saw myself. Someone running from something they couldn't escape. Someone who needed help and was too proud to ask for it." He paused. "I couldn't save my wife. But maybe I could save you." "We're not your redemption." "No." He almost smiled. "But maybe you're my second chance." Ruth didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. She just stood there in the warmth of a house that wasn't hers, with a man who wasn't her husband, feeling something she'd forgotten existed. Hope. A knock shattered the silence. Ruth jumped. Caleb was at the door in 3 strides, rifle in hand. "Who's there?" "Name's Margaret Brennan." A woman's voice, old but strong. "I live 2 miles east. Heard there was a woman with children at Thornton's place. Brought some eggs and bread." Caleb looked at Ruth. She shrugged, as confused as he was. He opened the door a crack. Ruth saw a woman in her late 50s, gray hair tucked under a wool cap, a basket over her arm. Her face was weathered but kind. "Ma'am," Caleb said. "It's past dark." "I know what time it is." Margaret pushed past him into the house. I also know what Ezra Stone's been saying in town. Figured this woman could use a friendly face before the vultures circle. She spotted Ruth and crossed to her directly. You're Ruth. Yes, ma'am. I'm Maggie. I buried a husband 30 years ago and raised 4 children alone in this territory. She set the basket on the table. I know what running looks like, girl. And I know what courage looks like, too. Ruth blinked. I don't. Ezra Stone is a snake, Maggie continued. He's been making noise all day about a stranger looking for you. Some folks are listening. Some ain't. She took Ruth's hands. I ain't listening. Neither is Pastor Weller. Neither is the blacksmith's wife or the doc's widow. You understand what I'm saying? Ruth felt fresh tears threaten. You're saying I'm not alone. That's exactly what I'm saying. Maggie squeezed her hands. Whatever you're running from, you got friends in this valley. Not many, maybe, but enough. Ruth couldn't speak. She just nodded, throat too tight for words. Maggie turned to Caleb. You watch out for her. I intend to. Good. Maggie headed for the door, then paused. That man looking for her, Marcus McAllister, he's staying at the boarding house. Word is he's got papers, legal papers. Ruth's blood went cold. What kind of papers? The kind that say a husband's got rights to his wife and children. Maggie's face hardened. But paper ain't law out here. Remember that. Men think paper means power, but power comes from standing your ground. She slipped out into the night. Caleb closed the door behind her. Ruth sank into a chair. Papers. He's got papers. Paper can be fought. Not by me. Not with 43 cents and 7 children. Caleb sat across from her. Then we fight with something else. Like what? Truth. His voice was steady. Community. Whatever it takes. Ruth wanted to believe him, but Marcus was smart. Marcus was patient. Marcus had spent his whole life learning how to win, and Ruth had spent her whole life learning how to lose. Caleb, she said, if it comes to it, if they try to take my children, I need you to promise me something. Name it. Promise me you'll get them out. Hide them somewhere Marcus can't find them, even if I have to go back. Her voice cracked. Promise me they'll be safe. Caleb leaned forward. I promise you this instead. Nobody's taking anybody. Not you, not them. We stand together, or we don't stand at all. Ruth stared at him. Why? Why do you care so much? Because once, I didn't care enough. His eyes held hers. And the woman I loved died because of it. I won't make that mistake again. Ruth felt something shift in her chest. Something that had been frozen for years, slowly beginning to thaw. Okay, she whispered. We stand together. Caleb nodded once. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we fight. Ruth lay down on her quilts, surrounded by her sleeping children. She listened to their breathing, felt their warmth, counted their heartbeats like treasure. Tomorrow Marcus would come. Tomorrow the fight would begin. But tonight, her children were safe. Tonight, she wasn't alone. And for the first time in 8 years, Ruth McAllister fell asleep without fear. The storm outside had quieted. But the storm coming was just beginning. Ruth woke to the sound of hoofbeats. Multiple hoofbeats, coming fast. She was on her feet before her eyes fully opened, heart slamming against her ribs. The children stirred on their quilts. Thomas sat up, instantly alert. Mama. Stay down. All of you. Caleb was already at the window, rifle in hand. He'd slept in his clothes boots still on. Ruth realized he'd been expecting this. How many? She whispered. 3 riders, maybe 4. His jaw tightened. One of them's dressed too fine for this weather. City clothes. Marcus. Ruth's stomach dropped. She grabbed Sarah's arm. Take the children to the loft, now. Don't come down until I say. Sarah didn't argue. She scooped up Clara, motioned to the others. Thomas hesitated. Mama, I should stay. Loft. Now. Something in Ruth's voice broke no argument. Thomas grabbed William's hand and followed his siblings up the ladder. Ruth counted them as they climbed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All present, all breathing, all hers. The hoofbeats stopped outside. Ruth heard voices low and muffled, then boots on the porch steps. Heavy, deliberate. A knock. Polite. Controlled. Caleb looked at Ruth. She nodded once. He opened the door. 3 men stood on the porch. 2 were rough-looking hired muscle by the look of their thick coats and empty eyes. The third stood in front tall and lean, wearing a wool overcoat that probably cost more than Ruth's wagon. Marcus McAllister. He hadn't changed. Same sharp jaw. Same cold blue eyes. Same thin smile that never reached anywhere real. "Mr. Thornton, I presume?" Marcus's voice was smooth as oiled leather. "I'm Marcus McAllister. I believe you're harboring my sister-in-law." Caleb didn't move from the doorway. "Ain't harboring anyone. Got a cook, that's all." "A cook?" Marcus's smile twitched. "With 7 children. How convenient." He peered past Caleb into the house. "Ruth, I know you're there. Let's not make this difficult." Ruth stepped forward. Her legs felt like water, but she made them hold. She made them carry her to the door. "Marcus." His eyes found her. Something flickered there, satisfaction maybe. The look of a hunter who'd finally cornered his prey. "Ruth, you look well, considering." "Considering what?" "Considering you stole my brother's children and fled across 3 territories." His voice hardened. "That's a crime, Ruth. Multiple crimes, actually. Kidnapping. Abandonment of marital duties. Theft of property." "Children ain't property," Caleb cut in. Marcus's gaze slid to him. "According to the law, Mr. Thornton, a wife, and her children belong to her husband. Franklin McAllister has legal rights to his family, rights that Ruth violated when she ran." Ruth felt her hands shake. She clasped them together to hide it. "Franklin beat me, beat his own children. I showed the sheriff in Nebraska. The sheriff in Nebraska has no jurisdiction here." Marcus pulled a folded paper from his coat. "But this does. A court order from Judge Patterson in Cheyenne. It grants Franklin full custody of his children and demands Ruth's return to face charges." Ruth's vision blurred. Court order. Legal. Official. She'd lost. "Let me see that." Caleb reached for the paper. Marcus handed it over, still smiling. Caleb read it slowly, his expression giving nothing away. Then he folded it and handed it back. "Paper says Ruth's got to appear before Judge Patterson," Caleb said. "Don't say nothing about you taking her or those children anywhere." Marcus's smile flickered. "It implies—" "I don't care what it implies. I care what it says." Caleb's voice went cold. "And what it says is, she's got to appear in court. Don't say when. Don't say how. And it sure as hell don't give you the right to drag her anywhere against her will." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Mr. Thornton, I don't think you understand the situation." "I understand it fine. You got paper. I got a rifle. You want to test which one carries more weight out here? You're welcome to try." The 2 hired men shifted behind Marcus. Their hands moved toward their belts. Caleb's rifle came up smooth and easy. "Your boys reach for those guns," Caleb said, "and I'll drop both of them before they clear leather. You want to explain to their families why they died for your paper." Silence stretched tight as wire. Ruth couldn't breathe. Then Marcus raised a hand. His men relaxed. "There's no need for violence," Marcus said smoothly. "I'm a civilized man. I came to talk, not to fight." "Then talk." Marcus turned to Ruth. "Franklin misses you. The children too. He's changed, Ruth. He's sober now. He prays every day. He wants his family back." Ruth felt bile rise in her throat. "He wants property back. That's what we are to him. Property he can break whenever he pleases." "That's not fair." Fair. Ruth's voice cracked. You want to talk about fair, show him William. There was movement on the ladder. William climbed down slowly, his small face pale with fear. He crossed to stand beside Ruth, and she turned his face toward Marcus. See that scar? Franklin did that, with his fist, because William was talking too slow. Ruth's voice shook with rage. William was 5 years old. 5. And your brother split his lips so bad he can't speak without stuttering. Marcus's expression didn't change. Children need discipline. Discipline. Ruth grabbed William's hand, held it up. See these fingers? 2 of them were broken last year, because William knocked over a glass of milk. Your brother broke a 5-year-old's fingers over spilled milk. Something flickered in Marcus's eyes, just for a second. Franklin was under a lot of pressure. Don't. Ruth's voice went ice cold. Don't you dare make excuses for him. I lived with those excuses for 8 years. I believed them. I thought if I was better, if I cooked better, cleaned better, stayed quieter, he'd stop. But he never stopped. He just got worse. William pressed against Ruth's side, trembling. She put her arm around him. These children have seen things no child should see. Ruth continued. They've heard things, felt things. Thomas set his own broken arm because Franklin wouldn't let me take him to a doctor. Sarah learned to hide the bruises with flour and water because we couldn't afford salve. Mary still wakes up screaming because she remembers the night Franklin threw me down the stairs. Ruth stepped forward, forcing Marcus back. You want to take us back to that? You want to hand these children to a man who breaks them? Then you'll have to kill me first, because I will die before I let Franklin touch them again. Marcus stared at her. For one long moment, Ruth thought she saw something human behind his cold eyes, something uncertain. Then it vanished. The law is the law, he said flatly. You can make your arguments to Judge Patterson, but those children belong to their father, and I intend to see them returned. Not today, Caleb said. Marcus turned. I beg your pardon. I said not today. Caleb stepped closer. Your paper says Ruth's got to appear in court. Fine. We'll ride to Cheyenne when the weather breaks. But until then, she stays here. Children stay here. And you get off my property. This isn't over, Mr. Thornton. Didn't say it was. But it's over for today. Caleb raised the rifle slightly. Now get. Marcus held Caleb's gaze for a long, dangerous moment. Then he smiled that thin, cold smile. I'll be back, he said. With more than paper. He turned and walked to his horse. His men followed. Ruth watched them mount up, watched them ride away, watched until they disappeared into the gray morning. Then her knees gave out. Caleb caught her before she hit the floor. He guided her to a chair, pressed a cup of water into her hands. Breathe, he said. Just breathe. Ruth couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. She could only see Marcus's smile, hear his words, feel the weight of that paper crushing her chest. He's going to take them, she whispered. He's going to take my babies. No. You heard him. Court order. Judge. The law. Ruth. Caleb knelt in front of her, forced her to meet his eyes. Listen to me. Marcus McAllister is a bully in a fancy coat. He thinks paper and money can buy anything. But he ain't met people who'll stand against him. What people who's going to stand against a court order? Maggie Brennan, Pastor Weller, the women in this valley who've seen what men like Franklin do. Caleb's voice was steady. And me. I'll stand against him. I'll stand until I can't stand no more. Ruth searched his face, looking for the lie, looking for the moment he'd turn away like everyone else had. She didn't find it. Why? She breathed. Why risk everything for us? Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he stood, walked to the window, looked out at the empty yard. When my wife died, he said softly, I blamed myself, still do. I told myself I'd never let anyone close again, never give myself the chance to fail someone else. He turned to face her. But watching you stand up to Marcus just now, watching you put yourself between your children and that man, that wasn't failure. That was courage. The kind of courage I forgot existed." Ruth didn't know what to say. "You remind me why I used to wear a star," Caleb continued. "You remind me what protecting people is supposed to look like. Not standing behind a badge waiting for trouble to find you, but stepping in front of the people who can't protect themselves." He crossed back to her, knelt again. "I ain't gonna let Marcus take your children. I ain't gonna let Franklin hurt you or them ever again. And if the law says different, then the law is wrong, and I'll fight it until my last breath." Ruth felt tears slip down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "I stayed too long, let him hurt them too many times. I should have left sooner. I should have—" "Stop." Caleb's voice was firm but gentle. "You survived. Your children survived. That's what matters. Everything else is just guilt talking, and guilt don't help anyone." The ladder creaked. Ruth looked up to see Thomas climbing down, his face pale but determined. "Mama, is he gone?" "For now." Thomas crossed to stand beside her. "I heard what he said, about the court order, about taking us back. Thomas, I won't go." His voice cracked but held. "I won't go back to Daddy. I'll run. I'll hide. I'll do whatever I have to do. But I won't let him hurt you again." Ruth pulled her son close. "Baby, listen to me. I'm not a baby." Thomas pulled back, and Ruth saw something new in his eyes. Something hard and fierce. "I'm 12 years old. I've set broken bones and hidden in closets and listened to you cry when you thought we were asleep. I'm not a baby anymore, and I won't let that man take us back." Ruth's heart broke and swelled at the same time. "Neither will I," Sarah said from the ladder. She climbed down, Clara still in her arms. "I'll fight too." "Me too," Mary said, following her sister. "And me," James added. One by one the children came down from the loft. Even Eliza. Even William, his scarred lip trembling, but his chin lifted. Even Daniel, clutching his sister's hand, but standing tall. 7 children. 7 survivors. Standing together. "Mama," Thomas said. "We're a family. Families don't let each other get taken." Ruth looked at her children. These broken, beautiful, brave little people she'd created and protected and loved. They weren't running anymore. They were ready to stand. "Okay," she whispered. "We fight. All of us." Caleb put his hand on Thomas's shoulder. "Then we better get ready. Marcus ain't done. He'll be back, and next time he'll bring more than hired muscle." "What do we do?" Sarah asked. "First, we tell our story." Caleb looked at Ruth. "Not just to Maggie or the pastor. To everyone. Every woman in this valley who's ever been hit. Every man who's ever looked the other way. We make them see what Franklin McAllister really is. And if they don't believe us, then we make them believe." Caleb's jaw set. "There's a town meeting in 3 days. Council gathers to discuss winter supplies, land disputes, whatever needs deciding. Ruth's gonna stand up in front of all of them and tell the truth." Ruth's stomach dropped. "I can't." "You can. You did it just now with Marcus. You made him see even if he didn't want to." Caleb took her hands. "Ruth, the only power men like Marcus have is silence. They count on women being too scared or too ashamed to speak. You break that silence, you break their power." Ruth looked at her children again. William with his scarred lip. Thomas with his old eyes. Sarah, who'd learned to hide bruises before she learned to read. They deserved someone to speak for them. They deserved a mother who'd fight. "Okay," Ruth said. "I'll do it." The next 3 days passed in preparation. Ruth rehearsed her words in her head 1,000 times. She told her story to Maggie Brennan, who wept and held her hands. She told it to Pastor Weller, who prayed with her and promised to stand by her side. She told it to the blacksmith's wife and the doctor's widow and a quiet woman named Hannah, who never spoke above a whisper. Each time she saw the same thing in their eyes. recognition, understanding. These women knew, they all knew. They'd seen it in their own homes, or their neighbors' homes, or their mothers' homes. They'd heard the lies men told, and the silence women kept. And they were tired of it. The morning of the town meeting, Ruth dressed carefully. She wore her best dress, the one with the patched sleeves and the mended hem. She braided her hair tight against her head. She looked in the small mirror Caleb had hung by the door and barely recognized the woman looking back. Stronger, harder, ready. "Mama," Eliza tugged her sleeve. "I'm scared." Ruth knelt down. "I know, baby. I'm scared too. What if they don't believe you? Then I'll make them believe. What if they take us anyway?" Ruth cupped her daughter's face. "Then we run again. We keep running until we find somewhere safe. But I don't think we'll have to run. I think today we're going to find people who'll help us stay." Eliza's lower lip trembled. "Promise?" Ruth kissed her forehead. "I promise to try. That's all I can promise. But I'll try with everything I have." The ride to town took an hour. Caleb drove the wagon, Ruth beside him, children bundled in the back. The cold bit through their clothes, but nobody complained. They were used to cold, used to hard. The town hall was a plain wooden building in the center of Miller's Creek. When they arrived, it was already full. Ruth saw farmers and shopkeepers, ranchers and their wives. She saw Ezra Stone in the corner, arms crossed, face sour. She saw Marcus McAllister in the front row, flanked by his hired men. And she saw Maggie Brennan, standing near the door, surrounded by a group of women. When their eyes met, Maggie nodded once. "We're here. We're ready." Pastor Weller called the meeting to order. He went through the usual business: first winter stores, a dispute over fence lines, concerns about wolves taking livestock. Ruth barely heard any of it. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Then Weller cleared his throat. "There's one more matter," he said. "A serious matter. Mrs. Ruth McAllister has asked to address the council." Murmurs rippled through the room. Ruth felt every eye turn toward her. Caleb touched her hand. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." Ruth stood. Her legs shook, but they held. She walked to the front of the room, turned to face the crowd. Silence fell like snow. "My name is Ruth McAllister," she began. Her voice came out thin. She forced it stronger. "I came to this valley 5 days ago with my 7 children. I came because I was running. Running from a man who was supposed to protect us, but chose to hurt us instead." She saw Marcus shift in his seat, saw his jaw tighten. "My husband is Franklin McAllister. He is a drunk. He is a liar. And he is the most dangerous man I have ever known. Not because he's strong or smart or brave, but because he has no mercy, no conscience, no love for anything except his own anger." Ruth reached for William, who'd followed her to the front. She turned his face toward the crowd. "This Scar Franklin did this. Our son was 5 years old. He was talking too slow, and Franklin hit him so hard the ring cut through his lip. William still stutters. He might always stutter, because his father couldn't control his temper over a child's slow words." She released William, gently pushed him back toward his siblings. "Thomas, my oldest, broke his arm 2 years ago. Franklin grabbed him so hard it snapped. Thomas set the bone himself because Franklin wouldn't let me take him to a doctor. He said doctors ask too many questions." Ruth's voice grew stronger with each word. "Mary has nightmares. She wakes up screaming because she watched her father throw me down a flight of stairs. I was pregnant at the time, with Clara. By some miracle we both survived. But Mary saw it all. She was 7. The room was deathly silent. Ruth could hear her own breathing. "I stayed with Franklin for 8 years. 8 years of broken bones and bruises and lies. I stayed because I believed him when he said he'd change. I stayed because the sheriff told me a husband had rights. I stayed because I had nowhere else to go and 7 children who needed feeding." She looked directly at Marcus. "Franklin's brother has come here with paper, with legal orders. He says the law gives Franklin rights to his children. To me." Her voice hardened. But I'm asking you, all of you, what rights does a man have to break his own family? What law protects a father who beats his children bloody? What justice sends a mother back to the man who nearly killed her? Marcus stood. This is outrageous. She's a fugitive, a kidnapper. She stole nothing. Caleb's voice cut through like a blade. He stood facing Marcus. Those children are hers. She carried them, birthed them, protected them. The only theft here is Franklin McAllister stealing 8 years of her life and the innocence of 7 children. The law? Hang the law. It was Maggie Brennan's voice. She pushed forward through the crowd. I've lived in this territory 40 years. I've seen what men do behind closed doors when they think nobody's watching. And I've seen what happens when women finally get brave enough to run. She pointed at Ruth. This woman is brave. Her children are survivors. And if this council sends them back to that monster, you're no better than he is. Other voices rose. Women's voices. The blacksmith's wife. The doctor's widow. Hannah, the quiet one, speaking louder than Ruth had ever heard her. My husband hit me too. Mine broke my arm, twice. I've seen Ruth's bruises. No woman makes those up. Franklin McAllister is a devil. Send him back his family, and you're sending lambs to slaughter. The room erupted. Men shouted. Women cried. Pastor Weller banged his hand against the podium, trying to restore order. Through it all, Ruth stood frozen. She hadn't expected this, hadn't expected others to stand with her, hadn't expected voices to rise in her defense. She'd expected to fight alone. Marcus's face had gone red. He pushed through the crowd toward Ruth. This is insanity. You're all insane. The law is clear. The law ain't justice. An old man stood in the back, voice rough as gravel. Ruth recognized him. Silas Crawford, the oldest rancher in the valley. I've seen men hide behind law my whole life. Hide behind paper while they do evil. Paper don't make something right. He hobbled forward, leaning on a cane. I fought in the war. Lost my leg at Antietam. I seen what men do when they think they got power. He stopped in front of Marcus. You got power, mister. Money. Connections. Paper with a judge's seal. But you ain't got truth. And in this valley, truth still means something. Marcus's hands shook. Whether from rage or fear, Ruth couldn't tell. This isn't over, Marcus said. I'll bring federal marshals. I'll bring them. Silas's voice was ice. Bring an army if you want. But you step foot on Thornton's land again. You try to take those children by force, and you'll find out what this valley does to men who hurt women and babies. The room went silent. Every eye was on Marcus. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Marcus turned and walked out. His hired men followed. The door slammed behind them. Ruth let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. It was Maggie who reached her first. She pulled Ruth into a fierce hug. You did it, girl. You spoke up. You broke the silence. He'll come back, Ruth whispered. With marshals. With more paper. He won't stop. Then we won't stop either. Maggie pulled back, held Ruth's face in her weathered hands. You're not alone anymore, Ruth McAllister. This valley protects its own, and now you're ours. Ruth looked around the room, at the women who'd stood up for her, at the men who'd listened, at her children huddled together by the door, watching with wide eyes, at Caleb, who stood apart from the crowd watching her with something that looked like pride. She wasn't alone. For the first time in 8 years, she wasn't alone. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. The children were exhausted. Ruth sat beside Caleb, watching the snow fall soft and steady. You did good, Caleb said. I was terrified. That's what brave looks like. Being terrified and doing it anyway. Ruth leaned against his shoulder. Just for a moment. Just long enough to feel solid ground beneath her. What happens now? She asked. Now we wait. Marcus will try something. Men like him always do. Caleb flicked the reins. But whatever he tries, he'll find us ready. And if we're not ready enough. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then we face that when it comes, he said. Together. Together. Ruth turned the word over in her mind. She'd forgotten what it meant to have someone standing beside her. Someone who didn't want to own her, or break her, or control her. Someone who just wanted to help. Caleb, yeah, thank you, for everything. He didn't answer with words. He just reached over and covered her hand with his. Warm, steady, real. When they reached the ranch, Thomas was first out of the wagon. He helped his siblings down, then turned to Ruth. Mama, I was proud of you today. Ruth felt her eyes burn. Yeah. His voice was steady. You stood up in front of everyone. You told the truth, even when you were scared. He paused. That's what you always told us to do. Be brave even when it's hard. Ruth pulled him close. I learned it from you kids. All of you. You're the bravest people I know. That night, Ruth put her children to bed one by one. She kissed each forehead, whispered each name, counted each heartbeat like treasure. When they finally slept, she found Caleb by the stove, staring at the flames. You should sleep, she said. Can't. Keep thinking about what comes next. And what does come next? Caleb turned to face her. Marcus ain't gonna give up. That court order's still valid. Judge Patterson might send marshals whether we want them or not. Ruth felt the fear creep back. So we lose anyway? Maybe. Maybe not. Caleb stepped closer. There's something I've been thinking about. A way to take that paper out of Marcus's hands for good. How? Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he said very softly, that court order gives Franklin rights to his wife and children. But if Ruth McAllister ain't Franklin's wife anymore. Ruth's breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying there's ways to dissolve a marriage, abandonment, cruelty, a judge who's willing to listen. He paused. I'm also saying, if you were someone else's wife, Franklin's claim wouldn't hold. The room went very still. Ruth stared at him. Caleb. I ain't asking nothing, he said quickly. I ain't proposing nothing. I'm just thinking out loud. About options. But his eyes told a different story, and Ruth felt something shift inside her, something that had been locked away for 8 years slowly opening its door. Caleb Thornton, she whispered. Are you asking me to marry you? He held her gaze. Would you say yes if I was... Ruth's heart pounded. This was insane. They'd known each other less than a week. She was still legally married to a monster. She had 7 children and 43 cents and a trail of broken pieces behind her. But Caleb wasn't offering to fix her. He wasn't offering to own her. He was offering to stand beside her, to fight with her, to give her a weapon against the man who'd stolen 8 years of her life. Yes, she whispered. If you were asking, I'd say yes. Caleb's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did, something warm and bright and fierce. Then I'm asking, he said. Ruth McAllister, will you marry me? Ruth felt tears slip down her cheeks, not from sorrow, not from fear, from something she'd almost forgotten how to feel. Yes, she said. Yes, I will. Outside the wind howled. The storm was building again. But inside something new was building too. Something stronger than paper. Stronger than law. Stronger than the man who'd tried to break her. Ruth McAllister had found her weapon. And she was ready to use it. Pastor Weller arrived at dawn the next morning. Ruth heard his wagon before she saw it, the familiar creak of wheels on frozen ground, pulling her from a sleep she barely remembered finding. Caleb was already at the door. Pastor, you're early. Couldn't wait. Weller climbed down, Bible tucked under his arm. Not for something like this. Ruth stood at the stove, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she hadn't drunk. Her children were still sleeping, all 7 of them tangled together on quilts by the fire. She watched them breathe and tried to believe this was real. She was getting married. Today. To a man she'd known less than a week. "Ruth." Caleb's voice pulled her back. "You ready?" She wasn't. She'd never be ready. But she nodded anyway. Pastor Weller stepped inside, stamping snow from his boots. His eyes moved across the room, taking in the sleeping children, the sparse furniture, the rifle still propped beside the door. "Unusual circumstances," he said quietly. "But I've learned unusual circumstances often bring the truest blessings." Ruth set down her coffee. "Pastor, I need you to understand something. This ain't a love match. This is survival." "I know. I'm still married, legally. To a man who broke my children's bones and nearly killed me twice." "I know that too." "Then why are you here? Why are you willing to do this?" Weller was quiet for a moment. Then he crossed to Ruth and took her hands. "Because sometimes the law is wrong," he said. "And when the law is wrong, decent people have to make it right. You're a mother protecting her children. Caleb is a man offering protection. That's not a sin. That's grace." Ruth felt her eyes burn. She'd expected judgment, expected sermons about the sanctity of marriage, about duty and obedience and submission. She hadn't expected grace. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet." Weller smiled slightly. "We've still got work to do. Wake your children. They should witness this." Ruth moved among the quilts, touching shoulders, whispering names. Thomas woke first, instantly alert. "Mama, what's happening?" "Something important. Get your brothers and sisters up." The children rose slowly, rubbing sleep from their eyes. Clara fussed in Sarah's arms until Ruth took her, bouncing her gently against her shoulder. "Children," Ruth said, "I need to tell you something." 7 pairs of eyes fixed on her, waiting, trusting. "Mr. Thornton Caleb has asked me to marry him, and I said yes." Silence. Ruth watched their faces, searching for fear, for confusion, for the rejection she'd dreaded. Thomas spoke first. "Will he be our daddy now?" Ruth looked at Caleb. He stepped forward, knelt down so he was eye level with Thomas. "I ain't trying to replace your daddy," Caleb said. "Nobody can do that. But I'd like to be part of your family, if you'll have me." Thomas studied him. That long, careful scrutiny Ruth had seen so many times. "Will you hurt Mama?" "Never." "Will you hurt us?" "Never." "Promise?" "On my life." Thomas looked at Ruth. Something passed between them, mother and son. Years of shared pain compressed into a single glance. "Okay," Thomas said. "You can marry her." Ruth let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. The other children murmured agreement. Mary, Sarah, James, Eliza. Even William, his stuttered, "Oh, okay," carrying more weight than any formal blessing. Only Daniel hung back, his small face troubled. Ruth knelt beside him. "Daniel, what is it, baby?" "If Mr. Caleb is our new daddy," Daniel whispered, "does that mean the old daddy won't come for us anymore?" Ruth's heart cracked. "That's what we're hoping, sweetheart." "Good." Daniel's voice was fierce. "I don't want the old daddy. He's mean." "I know, baby, I know." Daniel looked up at Caleb. "You're not mean, are you?" Caleb shook his head. "No, son, I ain't mean." "Okay." Daniel nodded once, decisive. "Then you can be our daddy." Ruth pulled her youngest son close, pressing kisses to his hair. 6 years old. He shouldn't know about mean daddies. Shouldn't have to choose between them. But he did. And he'd chosen. Pastor Weller cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" They gathered in front of the stove, the warmest spot in the house. Ruth stood facing Caleb, her children arranged behind her like a small army. Her hands trembled. His were steady. "Dearly beloved," Weller began. Ruth barely heard the words. She watched Caleb's face instead, the hard lines around his mouth, the softness in his eyes when he looked at her children, the way his hands enveloped hers, gentle despite their strength. This isn't love, she told herself. This is protection. This is survival. This is a weapon against Franklin and Marcus and every man who thinks he can own me. But somewhere beneath the fear and the calculation, something else stirred. Something warm. Something hopeful. Something that felt dangerously like the beginning of love. "Do you, Caleb James Thornton, take this woman?" "I do." "Do you, Ruth Ann McAllister, take this man?" Ruth's voice caught. She thought of Franklin, of the day she'd stood before another preacher and said these same words, of the hope she'd felt, then hope that had turned to ash and bruises and broken bones. She looked at Caleb, really looked at him. He wasn't Franklin. He wasn't charming or handsome or full of pretty promises. He was hard and scarred and lonely, a man who'd lost everything and was trying to find his way back, just like her. "I do," Ruth whispered. "Then by the power vested in me," Weller said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." It was done. Ruth McAllister was now Ruth Thornton. And Franklin's claim on her had just gotten a lot harder to enforce. The children swarmed them, hugs and questions and excited chatter filling the small house. Clara grabbed a fistful of Caleb's shirt and wouldn't let go. Daniel demanded to know if he could call Caleb Pa now. Thomas hung back watching, but there was something in his eyes that Ruth hadn't seen in years. Hope. Pastor Weller stayed for breakfast. Ruth cooked with hands that still shook, serving eggs and biscuits and the last of the salt pork. It felt strange serving a meal as a married woman again. Strange but different. Better. "Word will spread fast," Weller said between bites. "By nightfall, everyone in the valley will know." "Including Marcus," Caleb said. "Especially Marcus. He'll be furious." "Good. Let him be furious." Caleb's jaw set. "Let him come back with his paper and his threats. Ruth ain't Franklin's wife anymore. Those children ain't his to claim." "It's not that simple." Weller's voice was gentle but firm. "Legally, Ruth's first marriage needs to be dissolved before this one is fully recognized. We've bought time, not victory." Ruth's stomach dropped. So this was for nothing. Not nothing. This marriage is real. It's witnessed. It's recorded. Any judge who wants to give Franklin custody now has to answer why he's taking children from their mother and legal stepfather. Weller smiled slightly. "Marcus can wave his paper all he wants, but paper gets complicated when there's another paper waving back." "What do we do now?" Ruth asked. "Now we prepare for court. I've already sent word to a lawyer in Cheyenne. Good man, handled cases like this before." Weller rose from the table. He'll need to hear your story, Ruth. All of it. Every bruise, every broken bone, every time Franklin raised his hand. Ruth nodded. She'd told her story so many times now. To Caleb, to Maggie, to the whole town. Each telling got easier. Each telling made her stronger. "I'll tell him everything," she said. "Whatever it takes." Weller left an hour later, promises of prayers and legal help trailing behind him like smoke. Ruth watched his wagon disappear into the snow, then turned back to the house. Her house now. Her family. "Mama," Sarah touched her arm. "Are you really married to Mr. Caleb?" "I really am." "Does that mean we're safe now?" Ruth looked at her daughter. 15 years old, carrying a baby on her hip and a lifetime of fear in her eyes. "Safer," Ruth said. "Not safe yet, but safer." Sarah nodded. She understood. They all understood. Safety was a thing you built brick by brick, day by day. It didn't come all at once, but it could come. That was the important thing. It could come. The afternoon passed quietly. Caleb worked in the barn. The children did their chores. Ruth cleaned and cooked and tried not to think about what was coming. She was washing dishes when she heard it. Hoofbeats. Fast. Coming closer. Ruth's hands froze in the soapy water. She turned to Thomas. "Get your brothers and sisters to the loft. Now." Thomas moved without question, herding the younger children toward the ladder. Ruth dried her hands, grabbed the rifle from beside the door. The hoofbeats stopped. A single horse by the sound of it. Ruth peered through the window. Her blood went cold. It wasn't Marcus. It wasn't one of his hired men. It was Franklin. He sat on a black horse, his face half hidden by his hat brim. But Ruth would know that silhouette anywhere. She'd memorized it in terror, learned to read his moods by the set of his shoulders, the angle of his head. He was angry. She could tell from 50 feet away. The door slammed open behind her. Caleb, rifle in hand. "Who is it?" "Franklin." Ruth's voice came out flat. "Dead." "He's here." Caleb moved to the window. "That's your husband." "Was my husband." "He's alone." "He's never alone. He's got his fists. That's all he needs." Franklin dismounted. He walked toward the house with that slow, deliberate stride Ruth knew too well, the one that meant he was controlling himself, saving his rage for when it would hurt most. "Stay inside," Caleb said. "Caleb, I mean it. Stay inside with the children. Whatever happens, don't come out." He was through the door before Ruth could argue. She watched through the window, rifle gripped so tight her knuckles ached. Caleb stopped at the edge of the porch. Franklin stopped 10 feet away. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Franklin smiled. That smile, Ruth hated the one that never touched his eyes. "You must be Thornton." His voice carried in the cold air. "The man who's been keeping my wife warm at night." "She ain't your wife anymore." "Is that so?" Franklin's smile widened. "I don't recall signing any papers. Last I checked, Ruth McAllister belongs to me. So do my children." "You check wrong." Caleb's voice was ice. "Ruth married me this morning. Pastor Weller performed the ceremony. It's legal, and witnessed." Franklin went still. For one heartbeat, Ruth saw something flicker in his eyes. Surprise. Then rage, pure and hot. "That's not possible." "It's done. You can't just marry another man's wife." "I didn't marry another man's wife. I married a woman who escaped a monster." Caleb stepped forward. "You beat her. Beat your own children. Broke their bones and scarred their faces and made them afraid of their own father. That's family business. It became my business when she walked up my porch with 7 starving children and nowhere else to go." Franklin's hands clenched. Ruth knew that sign, knew what came after. "Get out of my way," Franklin said softly. "I'm taking my family home." "No." "I'll go through you if I have to." "You can try." The two men stared at each other. Ruth's heart hammered. She watched Franklin's hands, watched the way his weight shifted. He was going to attack. She knew it. Any second now he'd lunge and there would be blood. "Franklin?" Her voice surprised her. She hadn't meant to speak. Both men turned. Franklin's eyes found her through the window, and Ruth felt 8 years of terror crash over her like a wave. But she didn't look away. She'd learned not to look away. "Go home," she said. "I'm not yours anymore. The children aren't yours. You lost us the first time you raised your fist." "Ruth." Franklin's voice went soft, dangerous. "Come outside. Let's talk about this like civilized people." "There's nothing to talk about." "I've changed. Marcus told you, didn't he? I'm sober now. I'm praying. I want to make things right." "You can't make this right. Not ever. You broke William's fingers. You broke Thomas's arm. You threw me down the stairs while I was carrying Clara." Ruth's voice shook, but she kept going. "You don't get to make that right. You don't get to come here with your pretty words and expect me to forget. Those children need their father. Those children need protection from their father." Ruth stepped back from the window. "Go home, Franklin. There's nothing for you here." Franklin stood motionless for a long moment. Ruth watched the emotions play across his face. Anger, confusion, something that might have been hurt. Then his expression hardened. "This isn't over," he said. "You're still my wife. Those are still my children, and I'll get them back if it takes the rest of my life." He mounted his horse, wheeled it around, and rode away without looking back. Ruth sank to the floor. Her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. She heard the children scrambling down from the loft, heard their frightened voices, heard Caleb come through the door. But she couldn't move, couldn't speak. Franklin had found her. After all the running, all the hiding, all the praying, he'd found her. Caleb knelt beside her. "Ruth, look at me." She looked. "He's gone. He'll come back. I know. He won't stop. He'll never stop. That's not who he is." Caleb took her hands. "Then we'll be ready. Every time he comes, we'll be ready. And every time he'll leave with nothing." "How can you be sure?" "Because he's just one man." Caleb's voice was steady. "And we're a family. We've got the town behind us. We've got the law fighting for us. We've got each other." Ruth wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. But she'd seen Franklin's eyes, seen the rage burning there, seen the obsession. He wouldn't stop, not until he got what he wanted, or until someone stopped him for good. "Mama!" Thomas appeared at her elbow, face pale. Was that him?" "Yes, baby." He looked angry. He's always angry. "What do we do now?" Ruth looked at her son, her brave, broken, beautiful son, who'd grown up too fast and suffered too much. "Now we wait," she said, "and we prepare, and when he comes back, we show him what this family is made of." The next 3 days passed in uneasy quiet. Ruth jumped at every sound. The children stayed close to the house. Caleb kept his rifle loaded and his eyes on the horizon. But Franklin didn't return. Neither did Marcus. On the 4th day, a stranger rode up to the ranch. Ruth saw him from the window, a thin man in a city suit riding a horse that looked too clean for this territory. Her heart seized. Another lawyer, another court order. Caleb met him at the door. Ruth listened from inside. "Mr. Thornton, I'm Samuel Cooper, lawyer from Cheyenne. Pastor Weller sent me." Ruth's knees went weak with relief. She opened the door, stepped onto the porch. "Mr. Cooper, thank you for coming." Cooper tipped his hat. "Mrs. Thornton, I've heard a lot about your situation. Mind if we talk inside?" They sat at the kitchen table, the children sent to play in the loft. Cooper pulled out papers and a pen, his expression serious but kind. "I need you to tell me everything," he said. "Every incident of abuse, every witness, every piece of evidence you have." Ruth told him. For the 4th time in a week, she told the story of her marriage. The first slap, the first broken bone, the nights she'd hidden in the cellar with her children listening to Franklin rage above them. The morning she'd finally run stealing away in the dark with nothing but her babies and a prayer. Cooper wrote it all down. His face grew grimmer with each detail. "This is bad," he said when she finished. Franklin McAllister committed multiple crimes: assault, battery, child abuse. In a just world, he'd be in prison. But we're not in a just world. We're in Wyoming territory, where a man's rights over his family are still considered sacred. Cooper set down his pen. "The court order Marcus brought is legitimate. Judge Patterson is known for his conservative views on marriage. He's unlikely to dissolve your first marriage without significant cause." Ruth felt her heart sink. "So I lose." "I didn't say that." Cooper leaned forward. "There's another approach. If we can prove Franklin is an immediate danger to you and your children, we can petition for protective custody. Get a different judge to rule that your children should stay with you and your new husband until a full trial can be held." "How long would that take?" "Months, maybe longer. And in the meantime..." In the meantime, Franklin and Marcus will try everything they can to force your return. Legal pressure. Social pressure. Cooper paused. Possibly worse. What do you mean worse? Cooper exchanged a glance with Caleb. Men like Franklin don't like losing. When legal channels fail, they sometimes take matters into their own hands. Ruth's blood went cold. You mean he might try to take the children by force? It's possible. That's why we need to build the strongest case we can. Gather every witness. Document every scar. Make it impossible for any judge to send those children back to him. How do we start? We start with the town. Every woman who stood up for you at that meeting. Every person who's seen Franklin's handiwork. We get their testimonies in writing. Ruth nodded. I can do that. We also need a medical examination. For you and each of the children. Document the injuries old and new. There's a doctor in town, Caleb said. I'll take them tomorrow. Good. Cooper gathered his papers. I'll stay in the valley until this is resolved. Set up at the boarding house. Anything you need, you send word. He rose to leave, then paused at the door. Mrs. Thornton, I've handled a lot of cases in my career. Most of them the woman is too scared or too beaten down to fight. But you... He shook his head. You're different. You've got fire in you. That fire might just be enough to win this thing. Ruth didn't feel like fire. She felt like ash ready to scatter at the first strong wind. But she nodded anyway. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. After he left, Ruth sat alone at the table. Caleb came up behind her, put his hands on her shoulders. You okay? No. That's honest. Honest's all I've got left. She turned to look at him. Caleb, what if this doesn't work? What if Franklin wins? What if they take my children? Caleb knelt beside her chair. Then we run again, all of us. Me and you and all 7 kids. We pack up in the night and we disappear. Head west. Change our names. Start over. You'd do that? Leave your ranch, your home. This ranch ain't my home. It's just land. Buildings. Wood and nails. He took her hands. Home is people. Home is you and those children. Wherever you go, that's where home is. Ruth felt tears slip down her cheeks. I don't deserve you. That's not true. It is. I'm bringing all this trouble to your door. Marcus and Franklin and lawyers and court orders. You could have had a quiet life. I had a quiet life. For 5 years. And it nearly killed me. Caleb squeezed her hands. This trouble you're talking about. It's the first time in 5 years I've felt alive. The first time I've had something worth fighting for. Ruth stared at him. This hard-broken man who'd opened his door to a desperate stranger and her 7 children. I think I might be falling in love with you, she whispered. The words surprised her. She hadn't meant to say them, hadn't even known she felt them until they were out. Caleb didn't look surprised. He just nodded slowly. Good, he said, because I've been falling in love with you since you climbed down from that wagon. Ruth laughed. It was a broken sound, half sob, half joy. We barely know each other. We know enough. Caleb stood, pulled her to her feet, and wrapped his arms around her. We know we're both broken. We know we're both scared. And we know we're both willing to fight for those children upstairs. Ruth leaned into him. Let herself be held. Let herself feel for just a moment what it might be like to be safe. Whatever happens, she whispered, I'm glad I found you. You didn't find me. Caleb pressed a kiss to her hair. We found each other. Outside, the wind picked up. A storm was coming, another one piling snow on snow. But inside, Ruth felt something she hadn't felt in 8 years. Warm. Protected. Loved. Whatever Franklin and Marcus threw at them, whatever the courts decided, whatever battles lay ahead, she wouldn't face them alone. She had a husband who loved her, children who needed her, a community that stood behind her. And for the first time in her life, Ruth Thornton believed she might actually win. The storm hit that night. Winds howling, snow piling against the windows, the whole world reduced to white and noise. Ruth slept in Caleb's arms for the first time. Not as husband and wife, not yet. Not while so much was uncertain, but as two people who'd found comfort in each other's presence. When she woke, the storm had passed, and there were footprints in the snow, leading up to the house, circling it, then leading away again. Someone had been watching them in the night. Ruth stared at those footprints, coffee growing cold in her hands. Franklin. He hadn't given up. He was circling, waiting, planning. The real fight was just beginning. Caleb tracked the footprints until they disappeared into the tree line. When he came back, his face was hard as stone. He was here, Ruth said. Not a question. Someone was. Footprints match a man's boots. Heavy, deliberate. Caleb set his rifle against the wall. He's testing us, seeing how close he can get. What do? We don't leave the children alone, not for a second. And we get Cooper to speed up that court petition. Ruth's hands shook as she poured coffee. She'd spent 3 years running from Franklin. 3 years looking over her shoulder, jumping at shadows. She'd thought coming here might end it. Instead, it was just beginning. Mama? Thomas appeared at her elbow. I saw the footprints. Was it him? Ruth couldn't lie to her son. He'd seen too much, survived too much to be protected by pretty falsehoods. We think so. Thomas's jaw tightened. 12 years old, but his eyes belonged to a soldier. What do? We stay together. We stay vigilant. And we trust that the people helping us know what they're doing. And if they don't, Ruth pulled him close. Then we fight. The way we've always fought. Together. The morning passed in tense silence. Ruth kept the children inside. Caleb rode to town to fetch Cooper and check for any sign of Franklin or Marcus. The hours stretched like taffy, each minute heavier than the last. When Caleb returned, he wasn't alone. Cooper rode beside him. So did Sheriff Hank Dawson, a weathered man with a star pinned to his coat and a shotgun across his saddle. Ruth met them at the door, her heart in her throat. What happened? Franklin's been busy. Cooper dismounted, his face grim. He filed a complaint with Judge Patterson. Claims you kidnapped his children and married another man to spite him. That's a lie. I know, but Patterson's agreed to hear the case. 3 days from now, in Cheyenne. Ruth's knees went weak. 3 days. I pushed for more time, couldn't get it. Cooper pulled papers from his saddlebag. We need to prepare. Every witness, every piece of evidence, everything. Sheriff Dawson stepped forward. Ma'am, I'm here because there's been reports of a man watching your property. Multiple sightings, multiple nights. Given what Mr. Cooper's told me about your situation, I thought it best to offer some protection. You believe us? Dawson's face was unreadable. I believe in keeping the peace, and I believe any man who creeps around a woman's house in the night ain't up to anything good. It wasn't a full endorsement, but it was something. Thank you, Sheriff. He nodded once. I'll post a deputy on your property tonight. Anyone comes skulking will know about it. The men went inside. Ruth stood alone on the porch for a moment, looking out at the white expanse of snow, the dark line of trees where the footprints had disappeared. Franklin was out there, watching, waiting. But now she had people watching back. That night, Ruth barely slept. She lay beside Caleb, listening to every creak, every whisper of wind, every sound that might be a footstep outside the window. You're thinking too loud, Caleb murmured. Can't help it. Try. How? He pulled her closer. Think about after. When this is over. When Franklin's gone, and the courts have ruled, and those children are legally ours. What if that doesn't happen? It will. How can you be so sure? Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Because I've spent 5 years believing the worst was going to happen, waiting for it, hiding from it. And you know what I learned? What? The worst rarely comes the way you expect, and even when it does, you survive it. You keep going. You find reasons to live even when living feels impossible. He pressed a kiss to her hair. We're going to survive this, Ruth. Whatever comes, we're going to survive. Ruth wanted to believe him. She closed her eyes and tried to imagine after. A life without fear. Children who laughed without looking over their shoulders. A home where love didn't come with bruises. It felt like a fairy tale. But maybe, just maybe, it could be real. She slept. And for once, she didn't dream of Franklin. Dawn came gray and quiet. Ruth woke to find Caleb already dressed, already armed. "Deputy saw someone in the trees last night," he said. "Couldn't catch him, but he was there." Ruth's stomach clenched. "Franklin." "Most likely. He's getting bolder. Or more desperate." Caleb checked his rifle. "Desperate men do stupid things. Stupid things get them caught. Or get people hurt." Caleb looked at her. His eyes were steady, certain. "I won't let him hurt you. Any of you. I swear it." Ruth nodded. She'd heard promises before. But somehow from Caleb they felt different. They felt true. The next 2 days blurred together. Cooper came and went, gathering testimonies, preparing documents. Maggie Brennan visited with food and fierce encouragement. Pastor Weller prayed with them, his voice steady even when Ruth's faith wavered. The children sensed the tension. They stayed close, spoke quietly, watched the windows with wary eyes. Even Clara, too young to understand, seemed to feel the weight pressing down on the house. The night before the court date, Ruth gathered her children around the stove. "Tomorrow," she said, "we're going to Cheyenne, to stand before a judge and tell our story." "What story?" Daniel asked. "The truth. About your father, about why we left, about what he did to us." "Will the judge make us go back?" Eliza's voice trembled. "I don't know, baby. I hope not. That's why we're fighting." "What if we lose?" Ruth looked at her daughter, 10 years old, carrying fears no child should carry. "If we lose," Ruth said slowly, "we run again. We find somewhere else. We start over." "But I like it here." Daniel's lip quivered. "I like Mr. Caleb. I don't want to run anymore." Ruth pulled him onto her lap. "I know, sweetheart. I don't want to run either. That's why we're going to fight as hard as we can. So we don't have to." Thomas spoke up. "Mama, if the judge asks me what Daddy did, what do I say?" "The truth, all of it." "Everything." Ruth hesitated. She'd tried to shield her children from the worst of Franklin, tried to take the hits herself so they wouldn't have to. But they'd seen, they'd heard. They carried scars that no shielding could erase. "Everything," she said, "if you're brave enough." Thomas's chin lifted. "I'm brave enough." "Me too," Sarah said quietly. "And me," Mary added. One by one, each child spoke. James. Eliza. Even William, his stutter heavy, but his voice clear. Me too, Mama." Ruth felt tears slide down her cheeks. These broken, beautiful children. These survivors. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "All of you. No matter what happens tomorrow, I'm so proud." Caleb stepped forward. "I've got something to say too." The children looked up at him. This man who'd been a stranger 2 weeks ago and was now their father in all the ways that mattered. "Whatever happens in that courtroom," Caleb said, "you remember one thing. You're not alone. You've got your mama. You've got me. You've got a whole valley full of people who believe you. Franklin McAllister is one man. We're a family. And families don't break." Daniel reached for Caleb's hand. "Promise." Caleb knelt down, looked the boy in the eye. "Promise." Ruth watched her children cling to Caleb, watched them draw strength from his steadiness. She'd been afraid to trust another man, afraid to let anyone close. But Caleb Thornton wasn't another man. He was something different, something rare. He was hope. The morning of the court date arrived cold and clear. Ruth, dressed in her best clothes, braided her hair tight and looked at herself in the small mirror by the door. She looked older, harder, but also stronger. The ride to Cheyenne took 4 hours. Cooper met them at the courthouse steps, his face serious but encouraging. "The judge is a hard man," he said. "Traditional views, but he's fair. If we present our case well, we have a chance. And if we don't, let's focus on presenting it well." They climbed the courthouse steps together. Ruth's children clustered around her, Caleb at her side, Cooper leading the way. She felt eyes on her from every direction. Curious, judging, wondering. Let them wonder. Let them judge. She had nothing to hide. The courtroom was smaller than she'd expected. Wooden benches, a raised platform for the judge, a witness stand to one side. It smelled of dust and old paper and the sweat of desperate people. Franklin was already there. He sat in the front row, Marcus beside him. He wore a clean suit, his hair slicked back his face, arranged in an expression of wounded dignity. When his eyes met Ruth's, she saw it. The rage banked, but burning. The obsession. The absolute certainty that she belonged to him. She didn't look away. Judge Patterson entered. An older man, white-haired, stern-faced. He took his seat and shuffled through papers. "This court is now in session. Matter of McAllister versus McAllister, petition for return of children and dissolution of fraudulent marriage." He looked up. "Mr. McAllister, you've filed a complaint." Franklin stood. His voice was smooth, practiced. "Yes, Your Honor. My wife Ruth abandoned our home 6 months ago, taking our 7 children without my knowledge or consent. She's since contracted an illegal marriage with another man in an attempt to steal my family permanently. Mrs. Thornton, your response?" Ruth stood on shaking legs. "I left because Franklin beat me, beat our children. I ran to save their lives." "That's a lie." Franklin's voice sharpened. "She's always been unstable, prone to exaggeration. I never—" "You broke William's fingers because he spilled milk." Ruth's voice cut across his. "You broke Thomas's arm because he talked back. You threw me down the stairs while I was pregnant with Clara." The courtroom went silent. Judge Patterson's eyes moved between them. "These are serious accusations, Mrs. Thornton. I have witnesses, medical evidence, testimonies from people who saw the bruises, treated the injuries, heard the screaming." Patterson nodded slowly. "Mr. Cooper, present your evidence." What followed was the longest 3 hours of Ruth's life. Cooper called witness after witness. Dr. Harrison, who'd treated Thomas's arm and suspected abuse. Maggie Brennan, who'd seen Ruth's bruises the day she arrived. Pastor Weller, who testified to the fear in the children's eyes. Then the children themselves. Thomas went first. He stood straight and tall, his voice steady as he described the night Franklin broke his arm. How he'd begged his father to stop. How the bone had snapped like a dry branch. How he'd said it himself because Franklin wouldn't let Ruth take him to a doctor. Sarah spoke next. She described hiding the younger children in closets, covering their ears so they wouldn't hear. Cleaning up the blood when Franklin was done. Mary, James, Eliza. Each child took the stand. Each child told their piece of the story. William went last. He climbed into the witness chair, his small body trembling. Ruth wanted to run to him, shield him, take him away from this terrible place where he had to relive his worst memories. But she stayed seated. Because William needed to speak. Because the truth needed to be heard. William," Cooper said gently. "Can you tell the judge how you got that scar on your lip?" William's hand went to his mouth. His stutter was thick, each word a battle. Daddy hit me. Because I was talking too slow." He swallowed hard. "His ring cut me. There was blood, lots of blood. Mama cried. And your fingers. What happened to your fingers?" Daddy grabbed them, bent them back. They broke. Tears streamed down William's face. It hurt so much. I couldn't write for months. How old were you, William? 5. I was 5. The courtroom was deathly silent. Ruth looked at the judge. His face had changed. The sternness was still there, but underneath it something else, something human. No more questions, Cooper said quietly. Franklin's lawyer stood for cross-examination. William, isn't it possible you imagined? That's enough. Judge Patterson's voice cut like a blade. I've heard enough. Sit down. The lawyer sat. Franklin's face had gone pale. Patterson shuffled his papers. The silence stretched unbearable. In my 30 years on the bench, he said finally, I've heard many cases of domestic dispute. I've been taught, like many men of my generation, that what happens in a home is private, that a man has rights over his family. Ruth's heart sank. Here it came. The dismissal. The ruling in Franklin's favor. The end of everything. But I've also learned, Patterson continued, that rights don't include torture. They don't include breaking children's bones. They don't include terrorizing the people who should trust you most. He looked directly at Franklin. Mr. McAllister, I've listened to 7 children describe a childhood of fear and pain. I've heard medical testimony confirming their injuries. I've seen the scars with my own eyes. His voice hardened. Whatever rights you believe you have, you forfeited them the first time you raised your fist to your wife and children. Ruth couldn't breathe. I'm ruling in favor of Mrs. Thornton. Full custody of all 7 children is awarded to her and her current husband. The marriage to Caleb Thornton is recognized as valid and legal. The original marriage to Franklin McAllister is dissolved on grounds of cruelty and abandonment of marital duty. Franklin shot to his feet. You can't do this. I can, and I have. Patterson's gavel came down. Furthermore, I'm issuing a restraining order. Mr. McAllister is forbidden from coming within 100 yards of his former wife or children. Any violation will result in immediate arrest. Those are my children. Those children are not property, Mr. McAllister. They are human beings who deserve protection from the man who hurt them. Patterson stood. This court is adjourned. Ruth sat frozen. The words echoed in her ears, but they didn't feel real. Couldn't be real. Then Caleb's arms were around her. The children were swarming, crying, laughing. Thomas was saying something she couldn't hear. Clara was wailing. Daniel was tugging at her sleeve. Mama, Mama, we won! We won! Ruth looked at her children. All 7 of them faces bright with disbelief and joy. We won, she whispered. She turned to look at Franklin. He stood rigid, his face twisted with rage. Marcus was speaking urgently in his ear, but Franklin wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on Ruth. This isn't over, he mouthed. Ruth met his gaze. For the first time in 8 years, she felt no fear. Yes, she said quietly. It is. They left the courthouse as a family. Ruth walked with her head high, Caleb beside her children clustered around them. People stared. Let them stare. She was free. Outside, the air was crisp and clean. Ruth breathed deep, filling her lungs with freedom. Mrs. Thornton. Sheriff Dawson approached hat in hand. Congratulations on your victory. Thank you, Sheriff. I'll be keeping an eye on Franklin McAllister, making sure he respects that restraining order. If he gives you any trouble, you send word. I will. Dawson tipped his hat and walked away. Ruth watched him go, then turned to Caleb. Is this real? It's real. It doesn't feel real. Give it time. Caleb took her hand. Let's go home. Home. The word tasted different now. Not a dream, not a hope, a reality. The ride back to the ranch was the happiest 4 hours of Ruth's life. The children talked and laughed, releasing tension they'd carried for weeks. Thomas told jokes. Sarah hummed. Daniel fell asleep in Ruth's lap, a smile on his face. When they finally pulled up to the ranch, Ruth saw something that made her breath catch. People. Dozens of them. Gathered in the yard on the porch spilling out of the house. Maggie Brennan, Pastor Weller, the blacksmith's wife, the doctor's widow, Hannah, Silas Crawford. So many faces Ruth recognized, and some she didn't. They were holding lanterns, singing. "What is this?" Ruth whispered. "A welcome home party," Caleb said. "They've been planning it all week, waiting to see if we'd have something to celebrate." Ruth climbed down from the wagon. Maggie was the first to reach her, pulling her into a fierce hug. "You did it, girl. You stood up and you fought and you won. I couldn't have done it without you, without all of you. That's what community means." Maggie pulled back, eyes shining. "We take care of our own, and you're one of us now, Ruth Thornton. You and those beautiful children." One by one, people came forward, shaking hands, offering congratulations, pressing food and gifts into Ruth's arms. Through it all, she kept looking at her children. Thomas standing taller than she'd ever seen him. Sarah smiling without that wary look in her eyes. Mary and James and Eliza and William and Daniel running and playing like children were supposed to play. And Clara passed from arm to arm, cooed over and adored. This was what she'd wanted, what she'd dreamed of through all those dark nights in Nebraska. A family, a home, a community, freedom. Late that night, after the guests had gone and the children were asleep, Ruth sat on the porch with Caleb. The stars were out, bright and cold. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For everything. For taking us in. For marrying me. For fighting beside us." Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know what I was doing the day you showed up." "What?" "Trying to figure out how many more winters I could survive alone, counting the days until I just gave up and let the cold take me." Ruth's heart clenched. "Caleb, you saved me, Ruth. You and those children. You gave me a reason to live again. A reason to fight." He turned to face her. "So don't thank me. We saved each other." Ruth leaned into him. Let his warmth surround her. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we live. We raise those children. We build something good." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "We stop running." Stop running. Ruth had been running for so long she'd forgotten what standing still felt like. "I'd like that," she whispered. "I'd like that very much." They sat together until the stars faded and the sky began to lighten. A new day. A new life. Ruth McAllister had walked into this valley with 7 hungry children and 43 cents. She'd found a husband, a home, a community of people who stood by her when she needed them most. She'd faced down a monster and won. And now finally, she could rest. Not the rest of exhaustion or defeat. The rest of someone who had fought and survived and come out stronger on the other side. Ruth Thornton looked out at the land that was now hers. At the house where her children slept safe. At the man beside her who loved her without conditions or fists. Winter was still deep. Snow still covered the ground. But spring would come. It always did. And when it did, Ruth would be ready. She would plant gardens. She would raise animals. She would watch her children grow tall and strong, unburdened by fear. She would love her husband, learn his secrets, heal his wounds the way he'd helped heal hers. She would build a life worth living. Franklin McAllister was out there somewhere nursing his rage. Maybe he'd try again someday. Maybe he'd find ways to make trouble. But Ruth wasn't afraid anymore. She had survived the worst thing life could throw at her. She had protected her children. She had found love in the most unlikely place. Whatever came next, she would face it. Not as a victim, not as a runaway. As a woman who had finally, after 8 long years, learned to stand her ground. The sun rose over the mountains, painting the snow in shades of gold and pink. Ruth watched it climb, felt its warmth on her face. A new day, a new beginning. Ruth Thornton had come through the fire, and she had not been burned. She had been forged, and nothing in this world would break her again.